When my mom told me we'd be moving in with Grandpa, I thought it was going to be the best thing ever. I'd only seen him a few times a year, usually on holidays, but every time he was around, he was full of jokes, warm hugs, and stories that made everyone laugh until their sides hurt. He always had candy in his pockets, and he'd slip me extra whenever Mom wasn't looking. Everyone in our small Ohio town seemed to adore him. People would wave to him at the grocery store, stop him in the street to chat, and call him the nicest man you'd ever meet. To me, Grandpa was a legend. But things at home had been falling apart. Mom had just gone through a messy divorce with my stepdad, and we couldn't afford to keep our apartment anymore. The idea of moving into Grandpa's big, old house sounded like the silver lining in an otherwise terrible year. Mom even said it would bring the family closer. The day we arrived, Grandpa greeted us on the porch like we were royalty. His house, a 2-story colonial with green shutters, sat at the end of a long gravel driveway surrounded by tall oak trees. It looked like something out of an old movie, charming but a little worn around the edges. "Welcome home, kiddo," Grandpa said, sweeping me into a hug so strong it almost knocked the wind out of me. His flannel shirt smelled faintly of pine and old books. Inside, the house was warm but dim, with antique furniture, faded floral wallpaper, and that slightly musty smell old houses have. The floors creaked under my sneakers as I followed Mom up the stairs to what would be my new room, a cozy space with a small window overlooking the backyard. For the first couple of weeks, everything felt normal. Better than normal, actually. Grandpa made us pancakes every morning. He told me about his life growing up, taught me how to whittle wood in the backyard, and even let me help in his workshop. He seemed perfect. But I started noticing little things that didn't match the image everyone had of him. For one, he never let anyone go down to the basement. The door to it was always locked with a heavy padlock, and if I so much as glanced at it for too long, his voice would change, sharper, colder. "That's off limits, kiddo," he'd say, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Another thing was the way he'd disappear at night. I'd wake up for water and see him slipping out the back door, wearing his coat even in the middle of summer. When I asked where he went, he'd laugh it off and say, "Just taking a walk to clear my head." I wanted to believe him, but the unease was starting to creep in. The real turning point came one rainy afternoon when Mom had gone into town for groceries. I was alone in the house, curled up on the couch reading. The wind rattled the windows, and the old house seemed to groan under the weight of the storm. That's when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound coming from beneath the floorboards, like tapping. At first I thought it was the rain hitting the pipes, but the sound grew louder, more deliberate. Almost like footsteps. Curiosity gnawed at me. I set my book aside and crept toward the basement door. The padlock hung there like always, but the sound was definitely coming from behind it. I pressed my ear to the wood. It wasn't just footsteps. There was whispering. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. I told myself it was just the storm messing with my head, but the whispers had been clear enough to make out a word, my name. When Grandpa came home later, dripping wet from the rain, I tried to bring it up casually. "Hey, what's in the basement, anyway?" I asked. His eyes darkened in a way I'd never seen before. He set his coat down slowly. "I told you, kiddo. That's my space. You don't need to worry about it. But no buts." His tone was final, cutting through the warm, friendly image I'd always known. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt louder, every shadow in my room stretched longer. Around midnight, I heard it again, the faint tapping beneath the floor. I pulled the covers over my head, telling myself I was imagining it. The next morning, Grandpa was in a better mood, humming as he made breakfast like nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was off. I didn't know it then, but that locked basement would become the center of everything. The whispers, the strange nighttime walks, the moments when his friendly mask would slip, it all pointed to something I wasn't supposed to see. And I was going to find out what it was, no matter what. After that stormy night, I couldn't stop thinking about the whispers I'd heard. Every time I passed the basement door, I felt this pull, like the house itself was daring me to open it. I started paying closer attention to Grandpa's routine. He woke up early, always before me, and spent the first hour of the day somewhere I couldn't see. Sometimes I'd hear him shuffling around below, but never the sound of the basement door opening. That made no sense. If it was always locked, how did he get in? One Saturday morning, Mom had to go help her friend move furniture, so it was just Grandpa and me. He seemed in good spirits, sipping his coffee at the kitchen table. "Got any plans today, kiddo?" he asked, flipping the newspaper. "Just homework," I lied. My actual plan was to watch him like a hawk. After breakfast, he put on his boots and told me he was heading to the shed in the backyard. As soon as I saw him disappear through the back door, I crept into the hallway and stood in front of the basement door. The padlock was still there, solid and unmoving. I ran my fingers along the frame, looking for any cracks or loose panels. That's when I noticed something strange, tiny scratch marks near the bottom of the door, like someone had been clawing at it from the inside. A chill ran down my spine. Before I could investigate further, I heard Grandpa's boots on the back porch. I darted into the living room and grabbed a random book from the shelf, pretending I'd been reading the whole time. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered on me for a second too long. That night, I decided to push my luck. I stayed up late in my room, pretending to sleep until I heard the familiar sound of his footsteps downstairs. Then the creak of the back door. I waited until it clicked shut before slipping out of bed. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure it would give me away. The house was dark, except for a faint light spilling from the crack under the basement door. The padlock was gone. I knelt down, pressing my eye to the narrow gap, and saw shadows moving, shapes that didn't look like my grandpa. My breath caught when I heard it again, the whispers. Only this time they were louder, more frantic, like several people talking at once but in low, urgent tones. I couldn't make out every word, but one sentence came through clear as day. "She's getting curious." I stumbled back, nearly knocking over a chair. My mind raced. Who was she? Me. And who was doing the talking if Grandpa was outside? The sound of the back door opening snapped me out of it. I scrambled up the stairs and dove into bed, pulling the covers over me. My door creaked open a few seconds later. Through the thin space between my blanket and the mattress, I saw his shadow on the floor. He stood there for a long moment, breathing slow and steady, before quietly closing the door again. The next morning, I found the padlock back on the basement door. It was like nothing had happened. Grandpa made waffles, cracking jokes like his usual self, but I couldn't look at him the same way. Later that week, I got my first real clue. I was in the backyard helping him stack firewood when he asked me to grab some rope from the shed. The shed was cluttered with tools, boxes, and an old metal filing cabinet covered in dust. When I pulled the drawer open, a stack of yellowed papers slid out. They were missing person flyers. All of them were old, faded photos of young women, the most recent dated almost 15 years ago. My hands trembled as I shuffled through them. Why would Grandpa have these? Before I could think too much, I heard his voice behind me. "Find the rope?" I shoved the papers back into the drawer so fast they crumpled. Yeah. I grabbed the coil and tried to act normal, but my pulse was racing. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it all in my head. The locked basement, the whispers, the scratch marks, the missing person flyers. It didn't add up to anything I wanted to believe, but deep down, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever Grandpa was hiding in that basement, it wasn't just his space. And the longer I stayed in that house, the more I was starting to think it wasn't safe for me or Mom. By the time the following weekend rolled around, my nerves were stretched thin. I'd been sleeping with my bedroom door locked, even though I wasn't sure why. Grandpa hadn't done anything to hurt me directly, but those whispers, the flyers, the padlock, it all gnawed at my gut like a warning. I knew I had to see what was in that basement. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Mom announced she was going to visit a friend for the afternoon, and Grandpa volunteered to take her into town so they could stop by the farmer's market. He handed me a 20 and told me to order a pizza and stay out of trouble. The second their car disappeared down the long driveway, I bolted for the kitchen and yanked open the drawer where Grandpa kept the spare keys. My fingers fumbled through a mess of nails, loose change, and bottle openers until I found a small brass key with a faded red tag. I raced to the basement door, heart pounding so hard it hurt. My hands shook as I slid the key into the padlock. It clicked open with a sound so loud in the quiet house that I froze, half expecting him to come storming back through the front door. He didn't. I pushed the door open, and a wave of cold air spilled out, smelling faintly of damp concrete and something metallic. Like rust. Or blood. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, gripping the rickety wooden railing. The single light bulb at the bottom swayed slightly, casting shadows that made everything look warped and wrong. At first, it just looked like any old basement, boxes, shelves of dusty jars, and ancient washer and dryer. But then I saw the far wall. It wasn't made of the same concrete as the rest of the foundation. It looked newer, cleaner. Like it had been built recently. And right in the center was a heavy steel door with no handle, only a slot like a mail chute at eye level. My pulse roared in my ears as I crept closer. That's when I heard it again, the whispers. This time, they were clearer. I could hear the rasp of someone's breath between words, the desperate edge in their voice. Help us. I jerked back, my foot catching on a toolbox. It clattered to the floor, and the whispers stopped. My breathing was so loud in the silence that it scared me. I backed toward the stairs, my hands trembling. I didn't know what I'd expected, maybe rats or some kind of echo, but there was no mistaking that I just heard a human voice. And it hadn't been Grandpa's. I turned to run up the stairs, but that's when I heard the crunch of gravel outside. Tires on the driveway. They were back. I flew up the steps 2 at a time, slammed the basement door shut, and snapped the padlock into place just as the front door opened. Grandpa stepped in first, his eyes immediately landing on me. Hey, kiddo, he said slowly. What have you been up to? Nothing, I blurted too fast. He smiled, but it wasn't his usual warm smile. It was small, tight, calculated. Good. Best to stay out of trouble. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the voice over and over. Help us. That meant more than one person. Which meant I didn't even want to finish that thought. The next day, I tried to talk to Mom about it. I told her Grandpa's basement freaked me out, that I'd heard strange noise down there. But she just laughed it off. He's always been a little private about his workshop, she said. You're just letting your imagination run wild. I wanted to scream at her to take me seriously, but she looked so tired, so worn down from everything, that I bit my tongue. Still, I couldn't let it go. I started staying up later, listening for when Grandpa would disappear at night. Each time, I'd hear him head toward the basement. Each time, I'd hear faint noises beneath the floor, footsteps, whispers, sometimes even what sounded like soft crying. The worst part was, sometimes I thought I heard chains rattling. By the end of that week, my fear had shifted into determination. If Mom wouldn't believe me, I'd get proof. Photos, recordings, something I could show her to make her understand. But I had no idea that the night I decided to get that proof would change everything. Because the next time that basement door opened, I wouldn't be the only one finding out the truth. It happened on a Thursday night. I'd spent the whole day on edge, my nerves stretched tight like a wire. Grandpa had been in a strange mood, quieter, more watchful, like he could sense I was planning something. But I didn't care anymore. I needed answers. Around midnight, I heard the familiar creak of the back door. I waited until his footsteps faded down the driveway before I slipped out of bed. This time, I was ready. I had my phone in my pocket, its camera already set to record. The house was dark except for the dim glow of the kitchen nightlight. My bare feet barely made a sound on the old wooden floor as I approached the basement door. The padlock was gone again. I opened the door slowly, every hinge squeaked like a gunshot in the silence, and crept down the stairs. The cold hit me instantly, along with that metallic smell I'd noticed before. My breath fogged in the dim light as I reached the bottom. The steel door in the far wall loomed in front of me, the small slot in its center like an unblinking eye. I took a step closer, raising my phone. Hello? I whispered. At first, there was only silence. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice, a woman's voice, whispered back, Please. Help us. My skin prickled. Who are you? I asked. Before she could answer, another voice joined hers, this one deeper, male, and urgent. He's coming back. You have to go, now. My hand shook so badly the phone almost slipped from my grip. What's in here? Why are you? A loud metallic bang cut me off, echoing through the basement like a gunshot. I staggered back, my heart slamming against my ribs. The voices went silent. I turned to run and froze. Grandpa was standing at the top of the stairs. The light from the hallway behind him threw his face into shadow, but I could see his outline perfectly, still, unmoving, blocking my way out. What are you doing down here, kiddo? His voice was calm, but it sent ice through my veins. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. I thought I heard something. His footsteps were slow as he descended the stairs, each creak of the wood making me want to bolt. I told you this place is off limits, he said, his tone still even but colder now. You shouldn't be here. I backed away until my shoulders hit the steel door. Who's in there? I blurted out. He stopped a few feet from me. In the dim light, I saw his jaw clench. No one you need to worry about. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I heard them. They asked for help. For a long moment, he just looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Then he sighed and stepped past me, pulling a large ring of keys from his pocket. You want to know the truth? He asked quietly. Every instinct screamed at me to say no, to run, to get out of that basement. But I couldn't, not when I was this close. I nodded. He unlocked the steel door and pulled it open. The smell hit me first, stale air mixed with something sharp and chemical. Then I saw them. Two people, sitting on the floor against the far wall. A man and a woman, both in their 20s, their clothes dirty and torn. Their wrists and ankles were bound with thick rope, and their eyes, wide, terrified, locked onto mine the second the door opened. I stumbled back, my stomach lurching. Oh my God. They're dangerous, Grandpa said, stepping between me and them. You have no idea what they've done. The woman's voice was hoarse but desperate. He's lying. Please, he won't let us go. Shut up, Grandpa snapped, and it was the first time I'd ever heard real anger in his voice. Not just frustration, pure, venomous rage. I didn't know who to believe. My whole life, Grandpa had been my hero. But everything I'd seen in the last week screamed that something was terribly wrong. He turned to me, his expression softening again. Go back upstairs, kiddo. This isn't your business. I shook my head, my voice breaking. I'm not leaving them here. Something in his face changed then. The warmth drained away completely, replaced by something cold and unrecognizable. That's a shame, he said quietly. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make it clear I wasn't going anywhere unless he let me. My phone slipped from my pocket, clattering to the floor. Let me go, I shouted, twisting against his grip. That's when I heard it, the distant crunch of tires on gravel. Mom was home. Grandpa froze, his eyes darting toward the stairs. Then he released me, his voice low and sharp. Not a word to her. Do you understand? I didn't answer. I bolted past him up the stairs and into the hallway just as Mom walked in with bags of groceries. She smiled at me, oblivious, while I stood there shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I knew I couldn't tell her, not yet. Not without proof. But one thing was certain. If I stayed in that house much longer, I might end up behind that steel door myself. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every shadow in my room felt like it was creeping closer. I kept replaying the image of the man and woman in that basement, the dirt on their faces, the rope cutting into their skin, the desperation in their eyes. I wanted to believe there was some kind of explanation, something that made sense. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. Grandpa wasn't protecting anyone. He was hiding something monstrous. By morning, I had a plan. If I could get a recording of them telling their story, Mom would have to believe me. We could call the police before Grandpa had the chance to move them, or worse. But it had to be when he wasn't home. The next afternoon, I got my chance. Grandpa said he needed to drive into town for supplies and asked if I wanted to come. I told him I had homework, and he left without a fuss. The second his truck disappeared, I ran to the kitchen drawer for the spare key and headed straight for the basement. The padlock came off with a click. My heart pounded in my ears as I descended the stairs, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The steel door loomed in front of me. I crouched by the slot, my voice low. "It's me. I want to help you. Please, tell me what happened." The woman's face appeared in the slot, her eyes bloodshot but focused. "We were hiking. He offered us a ride when it got dark. Next thing we knew, we were here. It's been weeks." The man's voice came from behind her, weak but steady. "He leaves sometimes for hours, but always comes back. Please, you have to call the police before." The sharp squeal of tires on gravel cut him off. He was back. Panic surged through me. I shoved the phone into my pocket and sprinted for the stairs, but I was too late. The basement door slammed shut above me, and I heard the padlock click into place. I spun around, trapped. Grandpa descended slowly, each step deliberate. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold, unreadable. "I told you not to come down here," he said quietly. I backed toward the far wall, my breath coming fast. "You're hurting them." "I'm telling Mom, I'm telling the police." "You won't," he said, almost sadly. "Because I can't let you." The captives were shouting now, begging me to run, to get out. But there was nowhere to go. My only hope was the phone in my pocket. I yanked it out and hit record. "Why are they here?" I demanded. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer, but then he did. "Because they deserve it," he said flatly. "They hurt someone I loved, and no one else was going to make them pay." I had no idea if it was true or not, but it didn't matter. Keeping them like this wasn't justice. It was something else entirely. Something darker. Before he could stop me, I bolted for the stairs, phone in hand. He lunged, his fingers grazing my sleeve, but I made it past him, slamming my shoulder into the basement door until the old wood splintered. I burst into the kitchen and tore the padlock off from the inside, stumbling into the hallway just as Mom walked in from the front porch. She froze at the sight of me, red-faced, shaking, gasping for breath. "What happened?" I didn't answer. I just shoved the phone at her. She pressed play. Grandpa's voice filled the room. "Because they deserve it. No one else was going to make them pay." Her eyes widened. "What is this?" "Come downstairs," I said, my voice breaking. "You have to see." She followed me into the basement, and when she saw the steel door and the people behind it, her scream echoed through the house. The next few minutes were a blur. She called 911. Grandpa stood in the corner, silent, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. The police arrived fast, too fast, like they'd been waiting for something to happen. They pulled the captives out, their legs weak from being bound for so long. Grandpa didn't resist when they cuffed him. He didn't look at me or Mom. He just kept staring at the floor like everything was already over. Later, we found out the truth, or at least part of it. The man and woman had been missing for nearly 3 weeks. They didn't know Grandpa, had never met him before that night. Whatever story he told himself about them deserving it was something twisted and broken that lived only in his mind. He'd fooled the entire town for years, friendly, charming, the perfect neighbor. But in the end, he'd been hiding something unthinkable right beneath his own home. We moved out the next day. Mom barely spoke for weeks afterward. I didn't either. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, hearing those whispers in my head. And the worst part isn't what I saw in that basement. It's knowing that for most of my life, I thought my grandpa was the sweetest man in the world. And now, I'm not sure I'll ever trust anyone again. It's been 3 months since the night the police took Grandpa away, but the house still lingers in my mind like a shadow that won't fade. We haven't been back, not even once. Mom refuses to drive down that part of the road. She sold the place within weeks, even though most of Grandpa's things were still inside. "Let the new owners deal with it," she said, her voice flat and brittle, like glass about to break. I don't ask her if she dreams about it too. I know she does. We moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in the next town over. It's nothing like Grandpa's big colonial, no creaky floors, no musty smell, no oak trees stretching over the roof like watching giants. Just plain white walls, neighbors on both sides, and the constant hum of traffic outside our window. And yet, I still don't feel safe. At night, I lie in bed and listen for sounds beneath the floorboards. I know there's no basement here, but my brain doesn't care. Sometimes I think I hear it anyway, the soft tapping, the faint whispering of my name. When that happens, I pull the covers over my head and wait until morning. Mom started therapy last month. I haven't gone yet, but she keeps telling me I should. She says what happened to us isn't something you can just shake off. Maybe she's right, but I don't even know where I'd start. How do you explain to someone that your whole idea of family, of safety, shattered in a single night? The worst part is the way the town talks about it. News spreads fast in small places, and when the story broke, it was like throwing a grenade into everyone's lives. People who'd called Grandpa their best friend swore they always knew something was off. Others refused to believe it even after seeing the proof. He was the nicest man I ever met. One of the neighbors told a reporter, "No way he did those things." But he did. I was there. I saw. The man and woman from the basement are free now. I haven't spoken to them, but I know their names, Tyler and Emily. They gave statements to the police, and apparently they're staying with families somewhere out of state. Sometimes I wonder if they think about me, if they know I'm the reason they got out. Part of me wants to meet them, to hear their side, to fill in all the gaps in the story I'll never fully understand. But another part of me doesn't want to know any more than I already do. Last week, I had to testify in court. They didn't make me look at Grandpa directly, but I felt his presence anyway. Solid, heavy, like a storm cloud at the edge of the room. He didn't speak to me, didn't try to defend himself. He just sat there, hands folded, eyes on the floor. I used to think if I ever saw him again after that night, I'd want to scream at him, demand answers. But sitting there in that courtroom, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. There is no answer that would make sense. Some things aren't meant to be understood. Afterward, Mom asked if I wanted to visit him in jail. I didn't even hesitate. "No," I said. And I meant it. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I remember the way he used to be, the way I thought he was. The man who taught me how to skip stones across the pond, who carved my name into a block of wood and gave it to me on my 12th birthday, who always had candy in his pocket for me. And that's the part that hurts the most. Because those memories are real too. They're just tangled up with the horror of what I found behind that steel door. And I don't know if I'll ever untangle them. Mom says healing takes time. I'm not sure if I believe that. But I do know one thing. I'll never ignore my instincts again. If something feels wrong, I'll listen. I won't wait for proof. The night before we moved out of Grandpa's house, I stood in my bedroom one last time, staring at the floor. The tapping had stopped after he was arrested, but in that moment, I swore I could feel it again, like the house was still alive, still holding its secrets. I turned and walked out without looking back. And I've been trying to do the same with my life ever since.